Hello, hi. Today we are here to learn the very few basics of decoupage. Like we all know, decoupage is a French art. A lot of us have already heard about it, and this is a technique that was used to beautify the items that were already at home by the ladies in the France. So this has been passed over from generation to generation, and today we will start with something that's very basic. Like you can call this as step one. What all are we going to need on this is any item that you would want to decoupage. I am doing a small chopping board, that's a decorative piece. Decoupage tissues, these are available in the market. I'm using the Mopage and a couple of paints to suit and coordinate the kind of tissue that you're using. I'm also using a stencil to enhance the design and continue the design. I'm using sponges and daubers for the coloring purpose. So here we begin. This is a normal MDF cutout. This has been primed. I have primed it earlier so that it's dry and we can start working. You can use a primer, you can use gesso, you can also alternatively use a acrylic color on this, preferably white. Now when we come to the tissue, tissues are generally of 2 or 3 plies, that is meaning they'll have 2 or 3 layers. This is a 3-ply tissue, and please do not scissor cut the tissues when you want to decoupage. It's always best tone by hand. So the reason being, the blending of the edges along with the rest of the paint is easier, nicer, and it looks seamless. So this tissue, I'm going to remove the plies. Okay, like I told you, this is a 3-ply, meaning it has 3 tissues underneath. So 1 being the top layer, 2 and 3. So we get it off, and this is the layer. The topmost layer is what we're going to work with. This is kind of fragile, so please handle with care. There is a very fair chance that you will just rip it up. It needs to be handled with care. I'm just rubbing off the edges. Like I told you, please do not scissor cut. Scissor cut will not help you blend the tissue with the background that you will be creating. So it's always best hand torn. Okay. Now you need to predetermine what is the placement of your tissue. Where exactly you want to place the design. How do you want to run it through? These things are to be done forehand before you actually start your project, right? So this is how I will want it. I will continue the design by coloring and stenciling. So what I do next is, I'm going to take the Mod Podge. You don't require enormous quantity of Mod Podge for this, because we will be applying a very thin layer of it. Right? I am going to brush this out now. This will not be done in total. We are going to do it in parts. So I'm going to brush out one portion, go back to my tissue, lay it down, give it a nice press. Make sure your hands are not sticky, otherwise you will end up tearing the tissue. Once you're satisfied this portion is done, then we will move on to the second section. Repeat. We're going to place the tissue, give it a nice rub, Okay, there's another technique here you can use in case you're not very comfortable rubbing the tissue as it is. You get a lot of packaging material. You get plastic polythene covers like this. What you can do is place this on the tissue after you've applied the Mod Podge and then give it a nice rub. This prevents the tissue from sticking and also it helps you smoothen it out to the best level. Okay, and then we come back to doing the last bit of this tissue paper. Please be very careful. Rough handling, you will damage the tissue. And the quantity of Mod Podge that I've used on this, or the decoupage glue that I've used on this, is very minimum. Right? So this is almost done. Yeah. Before I go on to give the second layer of the Mod Podge, that is the top layer, I will let this sit and cure for a while. In the meanwhile, what I can do is I can extend my design and complete the form. So I'm using a sponge. I'm picking up a coordinating color and I'm going to dab this out. Here you can use chalk paints, you can use acrylic colors, whatever is comfortable, whatever is available can be used here. Right? Just lightening this out. What tissue you want to use, what color you want to use is totally an independent decision. There's no hard and fast rule. What needs to be kept in mind is there should be color coordination. It shouldn't be offbeat. You can do it with your brushes, but I prefer doing this with the sponge because the finishing is much nicer when we use a sponge. There are edges also where I have not used the tissue. I will color them as well. Your hands will get messy, but it's nice. I like my kind of messy hands, so okay. I'm almost done with the coloring. I'll just heat set it now so that we can finish this whole thing up. You don't have to heat set it, you can let it be. You can always let it dry in its own, take its own time and dry up, and then you can go to the next step. But since I am trying to finish this video up, I did do a heat set. There is a stencil script kind of a background on the tissue, so I will just try and continue that. For that I am using a stencil, and again I'm using a sponge dauber. You can as well use a stencil brush for this if you are comfortable. I'm going to pick up very little paint. Again, you can use acrylics, you can use chalk paints, whatever that suits you can be used on this. Chalk paints give you a matte finish and a little faster and easier to work with than the acrylics. That's a personal feeling I have. So I've used a stencil brush, tried to pull down the same design, the script that's on the tissue. You get stamps as well. So if you want, you can even stamp these. They'll also look nice when you stamp them. Okay. Just wash the stencil off under running water and you should be good to use it again. Okay, once this is done, what we're going to do is we will sand this off. Sandpapers are available with a lot of hardware stores. You can get one of them. What I am using is S3. It is 80 grains. So I'm going to hold this carefully, but ensure your Mod Podge layer is dry. That needs to be dry. If you do it while your Mod Podge is still wet, you will end up tearing the tissue and ruining the whole piece. Yeah, that's a very disturbing sound, but then I will need to sand this off to give it a clean finish. When we sand, the thing is, it gives you a very seamless finish. You know, there is a blend kind of a thing happening. So you can't really bifurcate that, you know, you have stopped working on the tissue at a certain point. That really doesn't come up. It doesn't hold out very highly. There was a corner that I had painted as well. I'm just trying to stencil it out and even out the design. You can do this for, you know, until you're satisfied and you are okay, like, you know, the design is merged well. That's when you can stop. Next step is distressing this. Like, you know, you can give a distressed look onto this so that the edges stand out and your whole project looks more complete. How we distress is, you can take a slightly darker shade of browns. I prefer using the browns to any other shades because it gives you a complete and a holistic kind of a look. So here I have a brown with me. Just taking very little onto the sponge. I am rubbing off the excess before I start. So I start from one corner and I distress this. It is not a mandatory procedure that you distress every piece that you decoupage. Again, case to case, item to item that you're decoupaging, you can opt to distress or not to distress. But decors like these, no, they give you a very beautiful finish when you have distressed them. There's a very uniform merging kind of a look that comes out when you have distressed the project, right? Now what we're going to do is, I see that this entire thing is dry and most of my coloring part is also done. Now I go back to give a second coat of Mod Podge on this. This coat can be slightly thicker than the primary coat. So there is a second coat of Mod Podge that I have put on this, and this will need to dry out completely before we put varnish and complete this project. Post drying, I will attach the pictures in the end of the video so that you can have a look of how the complete project would look. Thanks, bye.